If you're an account manager, you already know this. You're the one keeping the business running. You own the client relationships, drive the revenue, and solve the tough problems for your customers. But here's the challenge. Most companies don't give account managers the training or recognition they deserve. That's what you'll get here on the Account Management Secrets podcast. I'm Alex Raymond, and after working with thousands of account managers, I know what separates the best from the rest. In this show, we cover exactly what you need to succeed, handling tough client conversations, driving renewals and upsells with confidence, and proving your value every single day. There's no fluff, no outdated sales tactics, just real practical strategies you can use right now to grow your accounts and build a successful career. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit subscribe and let's get into it. Welcome back to Account Management Secrets. Today, I'm joined by Carl Lenocker, and I was super interested to talk to Carl because you have one of these incredible job titles that I don't see very often. You don't see this in many places. Your job title is Senior Customer Success Executive. So fair enough. You think, all right, great, that works. But then the interesting part is ultra accounts. And this got me thinking, what is an ultra account? How is it different from a strategic account? How is that different from a key account? And so on. And since Carl works at Splunk, I thought, all right, this is going to be the major, absolutely mega, top, great, big customers. So I'm really excited to jump into this with Carl today, talk about in more detail, what are the nuances of working with extra large accounts? And then on top of that, we're going to get into conversations around everybody's favorite topic, quarterly business reviews, how to do these right, and how to do these over a steak dinner as opposed to taking 2, 3, 4 hours of your customer's time to do it. So, hey, Carl Lenocker, great to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me, man. I've been meaning to get in touch with you to get on the show for a while, and we finally made it work.
Awesome. Yeah, no, glad you're here. And look, let's just start off. Help us understand this ultra accounts label. We've got some familiarity here on the show. We've talked a lot about strategic accounts and key accounts, stuff like that. What's an ultra? How did you guys at Splunk come up with this as a segment of customers? What does it mean in terms of who they are and what you do for them?
Yeah, I think it's a group of customers that have been out there for a while. They needed extra attention than perhaps the average, CSM could provide. When I say ultra accounts, I'm talking about customers who, spend, on average over 10, maybe $15 million a year in ARR. They're the big behemoths that you might think about, mostly, Fortune 10, Fortune 20, but you'd be surprised. I mean, there's some customers that are in the Fortune 200 that still kind of satisfy that spend requirement for us to consider them to be ultras and to give them the extra attention of putting a customer success executive on the account versus maybe your traditional, more technical, success engineer, or perhaps like a standard CSM of some type. It requires a special touch.
And is there anything that goes into them being an ultra account besides how much money they spend with Splunk?
You've got your typical, high touch is a phrase that you hear across the industry. You never really know what's going on with a customer until you get in there and rub bellies with them. But you'll find that, some of these ultra accounts that I've been attached to over the years have certainly been the types of accounts that, they needed constant attention. They needed somebody who would come in and build a relationship all the way to the top, to the decision makers and the economic buyers, and who would kind of steward them down the path, towards success. It's not just set it, forget it, here, install this, work with this, person from my PS group. It's a process when you have a product like we do that is essentially a box of Legos, right? I mean, people can take Splunk and they can build anything they want using Splunk. It's as big as your imagination is. That's, as big as the solution that you can create. Okay.
And then from your point of view, so that we can understand, are you associated with multiple accounts, or are you just deeply embedded in one, or like what's your portfolio look like?
Yeah, it depends. So, for the last 2 years, I've been assigned to, two of our largest customers, our biggest customer on the East and both the West Coast. So, very small, just 2 eggs in my basket. And but very strategic, right? I mean, at a high level, you're talking about companies where there's, maybe 50 to 100 teams inside of the company that could have their own unique deployment of what we do. And so that means you've got to do a lot of prioritization. You've got to, kind of decide who we need to be working with today and this week and in this month, and who maybe can, kind of go to the back burner depending on what's going on at any given moment. So we're doing a little bit of a transition right now, though. I'm moving to 3 accounts and just getting to know some of those new customers. It seems that I'm moving off of the large and onto kind of the more high touch stuff right now. So, they kind of put me where they need me.
Well, when I've worked with teams who have mega accounts, right? So I remember back in the day, a couple of years ago, we had a client, and their clients were like Google and Amazon and stuff like that, and these accounts were so big. They were just deploying, in this case, it was like an outsourcing firm. They were deploying hundreds of engineers, but then even then they had multiple account managers on a single account, right? So it wasn't even like a 1-to-1 ratio. It was a multiple account managers on a single account. What's your support structure over there? So what kind of team are you then deploying? And I'm guessing there's a team, because when it's numbers that big, you really want to make sure you're getting it right, and you're getting both the defensive, so keeping the customer, and the offensive, meaning growing the customer as well.
Yeah, it's a good question, because Splunk is still got its original DNA, kind of rooted deeply into that startup vibe. We've been a startup since the day that we got going, all the way until Cisco bought us last year. We still felt like we were kind of a startup, and so when you think about how startups run, they're very lean. We don't have an abundance of resources. I would say that we're, staffed with folks who are extremely sharp, at the top of their game, who are expected to kind of take on the world for their customers. And so, one of the most interesting things that we noticed when we got acquired by Cisco and started, melting into the Cisco account team structure is that they might have, for some of these accounts, they might have 75, 80 people assigned to an account like that.
Yeah, sure.
And it's fun.
Sure.
We had like 6 or 8. It was a lot less. But extremely sharp. We would have, obviously a customer success executive like myself, kind of managing the circus behind. We've got a sales rep, out there chasing IECB, sales engineer, just mainly focusing on pre-sales. We'll have like a technical account manager who's a technical resource, kind of in the trench with the customer, trying to help them with their technical journey. Maybe we'd have an assigned expert if there's a product or a function that the customers purchase that we need a little bit of extra expertise. Professional services. Maybe there's a staff aug, maybe there's not. It really depends on the customer. But it's the biggest thing that I've noticed is that we've done so much with so little over the years, and we're just used to doing that. That's standard, just daily business for us. And then getting acquired by such a large customer, now we're going, wow, like we did all that with such a small team. It's been a really interesting part of our journey.
So then you're a major profit contributor back to the company, right? If you're able to manage these gigantic customers who are worth tens and tens of millions of dollars with a small team, it's a pretty profitable business you got going there.
It's pretty wild. I think it was, well documented somewhere. I read that Splunk, if you read through our 10Ks and things, we're one of probably the top 5 or 8 software companies of all time when it comes to revenue contribution per employee. Yeah.
I bet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast and within the Amplify community, Carl, is like, what's the role? What's the purpose of the account manager? Right. So in your case, you're called a senior customer success executive. Same general idea, account manager. When you think about the directives that you're getting from your leadership, how Cisco and Splunk think about the entire role of customer success executive or account manager, how do you translate that into your day-to-day? Like, what is your mission? What is it that you are then like contributing back to the business?
Yeah, it's this balance, I think, in our industry right now. A lot of folks are wondering, do I protect revenue? Do I grow revenue? Do I carry a number? Like we're figuring that out, like everybody else out there right now, right? It's tough to figure out where the industry is going long term, but I would say that overall, it's very renewal focused at this point. I mean, making sure that these customers are taken care of, that they feel heard, that they feel like they have the right relationships with our executives and our product team. Kind of making sure that their, outcomes that they signed up for or delivered. Promises made, promises kept is kind of the mantra that I always put out there for our junior CSMs in terms of, we got to do everything we can to make good on our promises for the customers. And I mean, sometimes that can look very different depending on the day or the week, right? I mean, you could be, in the field with decision makers having great conversations about business outcomes and value and, how many millions of dollars are we going to save you next month? Or you could be, on a phone call at midnight listening to, escalations happening because something's not going right. And you've got to make sure, even though you've got a team in place of technical folks who that's their job to make sure that this goes okay, it all rolls up to you. You're responsible for everything post-sale, every bit of it. So it takes a really unique individual to be able to fill all those shoes and wear all those hats, I think. And it's a hard position to hire for. We have a really hard time hiring for the position because you've got to have a background in, you got to have been technical at one point in your life, but you've got to be a business person. You probably got to be an MBA. You've got to be able to sit down face to face with, VPs and C levels and understand what keeps them up at night from a business perspective. But you've also got to understand the product and how it can be, twisted and bent to create, the vision and desires of your customer. And then you got to know people. I mean, at the end of the day, right, whether you're, creating events, for executives or if you're taking, security operation, type folks out for happy hours or whatever, you got to know people at all levels and be comfortable, hanging out with folks from, the lower level engineering folks all the way up to the leadership on your accounts. And I think that's what differentiates, CSM from CS executive. I feel like you've got that real tried and true business component of your game honed and ready to deploy versus CSMs are usually still kind of straddling the line between, am I a technical person? Am I a business person? I know I'm supposed to talk about outcomes, but, I don't know if they have full confidence to go in and own relationships at the highest levels.
Well, and then you've got this whole conversation about how much should I talk about money? Should I be carrying a quota? These conversations are still ongoing, even in 2025. The world has not made up its mind yet. I've made up my mind about it, but the world has not made up its mind about it. That we really do need to be having business conversations, money conversations, throughout this entire post-sales stack. So that's another thing that we're still kind of open to. And so how do you think about the money part?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you want to maintain that trusted advisor badge at the end of the day, and you want your customers to come to you in confidence about the things that, they want to share, and if you have a quota, I just feel like it's so much more difficult to create that kind of relationship, when they know that, upsell is on you and, you're being bonused on, X amount of revenue coming in or whatever it is. It makes it a little more sticky. I personally like the model that we've developed where, we do a pretty high salary plus MBO type model, and there's no commission. There's no number in there for us. I mean, it's just, let's hire great people. Let's pay them well. If they do well and the company does well, they're going to get some MBO, but we're not going to spiff them on, adding on features or selling products or any of that stuff. It's really about, focus on your customer, and that's the sales rep's job to kind of, carry that component of the relationship in terms of the upsell and the growth.
All right. So let's talk about that then. How does that incentive then change your behavior? So how do you act differently if you do have a quota or if you don't?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the thing that kind of keeps me up at night is losing a customer, right? If you're going to ever lose a customer in this business, when you're talking about accounts this big, those are numbers that could move the stock, on Wall Street. And if it comes as a surprise, you're in deep shit. Pardon my French, but that's something that you absolutely want to avoid at all, possible cost. And, how do you do that? I mean, you've got to get very proactive in your accounts. You got to get very strategic. You've got to have relationships where you can, these people can trust you and they're telling you information so that they're going to share with you well in advance. Like, hey, we're thinking about pulling out at the end of this year. We've got, X, Y, and Z problem with your product or just the price or whatever it is. And, we're moving so that, you can get risks opened up internally. You can pull the right alarm bells and make sure that people know what's going on, and then hopefully pull in resources to prevent that lost business. I think that's the biggie, right? In the motivation there, I don't really need a commission to, or an MBO component to motivate me in that situation. I think it's very clear as someone who kind of plays at the top of his game in this business that if you're going to lose customers like that, you're probably not going to be in this business, very, very long. Your longevity is severely stunted in a situation like that. And that's all the motivation that I need personally.
So is the sense then that you can't be a trusted advisor and be perceived as benefiting from the customer paying more? Like, does the customer not expect a trusted advisor to get paid?
No, I think that they're aware. What most of the customers though in the large, like the Fortune 100 space tell me is that they want predictability on, future cost, and they don't want like these surprise bills, right? They don't want, Oracle's a big example that you hear about out in the industry that I don't know if it's going on anymore, but for a time they would just show up and they would get a beachhead in with a customer. They would build up a giant footprint. And then a year or two from now, the customer would get one of these surprise bills for like 10 or $20 million more than what they were paying. No warning, no, anything to kind of allow them to plan for that. It was just like, sorry, like that's on you guys. You used more of the product than you thought you were going to use. And so you owe us all this money. I want to avoid having conversations like that with my customer, right? I want them to feel like it's easy to do business with me and my company because we make it easy for them. We're not here to play gotcha and, surprise you. We're here. If you're growing your footprint with me, that you're doing it for a particular reason to achieve some value and some outcomes that contribute to your bottom line. Great. Like, we're going to probably do 3-year deals with you in that scenario. And at the end of the 3-year deal, if your footprints increase like substantially, yeah, there's going to be a conversation about getting some additional funds, but it should never come as a surprise. That should be something that we're talking about all the time, and we're building it into your strategy. And it's not something that I'm forcing from my role. I'm supporting. I'm the one who's helping you with your vision in that respect.
So one of the things that I always I'm a big proponent of it when it comes to surprises, to making sure that we're not getting hit with a nasty surprise from a customer, is doing the quarterly business review, QBR. Now, QBR is like one of these like endless conversations within the account management and customer success world. How to do them right, when to do them, when not to do them, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, I'm a huge believer in them. They can be extremely effective. And I've seen some stuff of yours where, you were saying QBR is something that should be done fast, like meaning over lunch, over, a single meal. This should be something that literally fits on the back of where the agenda fits on the back of a cocktail napkin, as opposed to, what a lot of CSMs and AMs are doing today is these gigantic, like 50-page decks, and they want to get through everything, and they're squeezing all this information in. And it's a major topic, right? So it's a big topic. We've talked about it on this podcast before within the Amplify community. We even have a program called QBR Mastery within Amplify. So there's a lot there. I did a webinar this morning called Flip the QBR, where we were talking about different approaches to QBR and how to change your mindset around them to get better results. So with that as a preamble here, like, what's your approach? What do you think about QBRs?
Well, I'll say, like, these days, like you said, I run them lean and mean, if we even do them. Earlier in my career, and probably the same for you, it sounds like you've had some awakening and you run them pretty lean and keep customers engaged as well. But wouldn't you say, kind of looking back, if you look back a few years, 90% of the QBRs that you sat through were probably total bullshit?
Well, not only were they bullshit, they were also internal looking, right? So you show up to a QBR and all you're doing is talking about, here's here's our office and here's our 3 new senior hires and here's the award that Gartner gave us last year and here's our road and it's all talking about us. Nothing's talking about
Mhm.
the customer. No wonder
Yeah,
everyone's getting ghosted.
yeah. I mean, it's anytime that you're doing PowerPoint, already you've kind of lost me from the beginning, and you've got to win me back, right? Because I can't stand PowerPoint. I mean, I feel like it's inauthentic. It's you're pitching at someone, you're talking at someone, you're not having a conversation. I don't like it. If I do QBRs, on site in a conference room, because sometimes you have to, and that's where your client wants to do it or whatever. Usually, I'm opening it up with the voice of the customer, and I'm putting some of the responsibility back on the customer. Like, hey, come and talk for 10 minutes about your experience, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do better on, and then maybe I'm bringing some technical experts because I've already kind of prepped and I know what they want to talk about. Right? We're gonna hey, that problem that you had this year with this, here's the lead product manager for that product. Here's a commitment to address your concerns going forward. I mean, there's got to be serious value in those meetings, because otherwise there's no reason for the customer to even show up, especially their leaders. I don't know how many times I've been in a QBR like earlier in my career when the leader would come in, he would sit there for 15 minutes and then he would get up and walk out of the room and just be like, just keep going without me. Like, I don't
Ugh,
need to be here for
ugh.
this.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, if you've been in a QBR like that, that he didn't see that it was valuable. Otherwise he would have stayed, right?
Yeah.
So
So what makes it onto the napkin for you? What are the bullet points that you want to make sure you're hitting?
yeah, I mean, I think it's, where are we going, or where are we at, where are we going, what do we need to do to get there, and are we aligned, across those three bullets, really. If I don't have a good understanding of my account, I can't articulate that in a short form. We're sitting in a steakhouse having a conversation. Maybe we're doing kind of a quarterly check-in in terms of all the projects that you've got going on and where we're going, long-term vision for the year. Like, if I don't have a good understanding of my account, I can't do that. And I feel like that's why a lot of people hide behind 30 slides, is because they don't have a good understanding of their account. They can't talk free form with their customer. They can't get up and whiteboard, when we're having ideas and discussions, because they don't understand everything that's going on, and that's a huge miss. I understand it though in some respects. There's CSMs out there, and I used to be one of them, that are carrying like 12 accounts,
Or
and
more, or
that's
20
another
or
thing.
30. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so your leaders can't tell you like, hey, Alex, go out in the field and I want you to be strategic as hell, and then give you like 25 accounts. That doesn't work. The math doesn't math,
No.
right? So,
It does not compute. And I like the way you frame that. One of the things I talked about today was on this webinar. Let me try it out on you, Carl. So one of the things I talked about today was I want us to get out of the mindset of presentation mode, right? Meaning, okay, I've got 60 minutes with the client. I need to talk for 59 and a half of those minutes. And I'm going to get through my slides come hell or high water. And I'm just going to, like just data dump all this information onto you. We need to get out of that presentation mode and into a facilitation mode. And that's kind of what you were just talking about. You said you might open with a voice of customer and what's going on. And what we're doing there is we're getting good at extracting information from other people, at connecting the dots, making sure everyone is involved. Another total bugbear of mine is there should be no wallflowers in the QBR. Nobody's sitting there just to say, I'm here to observe, right? That's bad QBR behavior. We don't want that. But if I show up as the account manager or the CSM and I'm facilitating the meeting, making sure that everyone's participating, all voices are getting out there, we're asking great questions, that's going to lead to a totally different outcome than if I just show up, open my laptop, and rip through my PowerPoint. How do you react to that?
100%. I mean, it's you sometimes it's some of the bigger software vendors too. I mean, we'll show up to a QBR and we'll bring like 5 or 6 people with us. And you're right. There's folks who will kind of just camp out in the room and like check a box that I was there. And if you're not adding value, if you didn't come to answer a specific question that we knew was going to come up, or you didn't come to build a relationship, executive to executive, product manager to executive, whatever reason you're there, you shouldn't be there. I mean, you should skip that meeting. It should be valuable. So anybody who's going to attend needs to bring value and contribute. And like you said, I mean, customer, doing most of the talking, you're listening. Maybe you've done some pre-conversations where you're coming to address concerns in that way. But that's that's the only reason that I would come to like pitch anything or share anything is, I've already anticipated your ask. Is this still correct? Well, good. That's why I brought Bob over here, and Bob's gonna talk to you about some things.
Yeah,
So
totally. And by the way, the flip side of this is can be a pretty awkward conversation for people, right? If whoever, someone from product or marketing or your boss or your boss's boss wants to come to the QBR, and you got to say, no, you can only come to the QBR if you're going to be an active and meaningful and valuable participant. Otherwise, you're not invited. That could be a pretty tough call.
yeah, I mean, I think we've all been in those situations where we've had to ask a boss or a VP of sales or whatever, like, hey, can you hang back on this one? It's not the type of meeting where I think you're going to add a ton of value, and we don't want to come over the top or look desperate to our customer that we've got this big executive in the room and maybe they don't have a peer from their side or
Yeah.
something, right? You got to balance the table and be thoughtful. Read the room before you even get in the room. So
Walk us back in time here. So you mentioned being in a QBR where the exec gets up 15 minutes in and says, "Carry on without me. I'm out of here." What did you learn from that? What did you learn from that? And what are you doing now to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, great question. I think that, when I was in my younger days, I would show up with this, big deck, and I would think that we have to read through it from top to bottom, ad nauseum, and just kind of put the customer to sleep, and, try not to even get anybody to ask any questions, and just like, let me get through this thing, please. 'Cause I'm sweating through my shirt, and I'm just dying. I'm bright red, probably beet red because I didn't sleep the night before and stuff. Versus now, I kind of want to have the deck to fall back on, maybe. Just it's like an appendix almost, just so you got all this data. I'll send it to whoever couldn't make the meeting, great, but this is going to be an interactive meeting. And if I see that we've got a high level executive sitting across in the room, he's popped in, we need to go straight to what he wants to talk about immediately. Like, he kind of trumps all because his time is extremely valuable. If he doesn't find it valuable, he's going to bail. So, we need to shoot right to the meat of the issues. And, when you might just, have the conversation directly, right? Like, hey, Dave, I see you're here. Thanks so much for giving us a few minutes. How long are you with us today? Okay, you got 30 minutes. Okay. In that 30 minutes, if I can truncate what we're going to talk about today for you is, the support issues we've had, we could probably save that for later. But how about, the project status and, the speed bumps you guys are running into with our product, like, that our cloud is maybe been choking a little bit, and we want to talk about how we can get that to a point where it's a little bit more resilient for you. Like, does that sound good? Great. Okay. And then we, on the fly, change the agenda, hit what we need to for 30 minutes. He bails, or sometimes he's had such a good time that he sticks around, right, for the rest of it. I mean, that's happened too.
That's a very important indicator, right? So there's data out there that basically says if the C-suite is showing up to your QBRs, you are way more likely to have an upsell opportunity. And if they're bailing and they're not showing up and you're just meeting with junior folks, customers are something like 4 times more likely to churn.
Yeah, I mean, you're not a strategic partner if the C-level or the VPs, senior leadership are not in the room with you, right? You're not a senior partner or strategic partner. You're another tool in the toolbox at that point, which is not what you want to be if you want to be a strategic, long-term partner.
So you a fan of formal in-person QBRs, lunch or extracurricular QBRs, or remote, and we're doing everything on Zoom or Teams? Like, what's your format?
Well, it's funny because I had a poll on LinkedIn this week. I don't know if you saw it. I got like 100 folks to participate that are CSMs, and it asked, what's the most valuable interaction you have with your customer? And I think it was, strategic chats over dinner, QBR in a conference room, Zoom calls, one-on-one calls or texts, or other. And it was almost 50%, I think, was strategic chats over dinner, then like 30% one-on-one phone calls and text messages, and then just a little bit kind of scattered across the remaining results. And I align pretty closely to that myself in terms of 90% plus of the meetings I've had over the last 6 years have been across a dinner table. I'll occasionally do a lunch. You can drag me into the office if I absolutely have to because we, got some formal event, but like a one-on-one or a two-on-one dinner is so much more valuable. And if executed properly, it's going to bring more value than any QBR that you're ever going to do. If you're doing it with the right person and you're talking about the right stuff, which is, it's scary to a lot of leaders in the industry, right? Because they're like, oh God, can I trust my CS executive to go in the field and sit down with, these directors and above over dinner and talk strategy and stuff? Or is it just going to turn into like a boondoggle and we're just spending all this money for steak dinners and hotels and flights? Are we going to get anything out of it? And it's an interesting question because, like I said earlier, you got to hire for roles like this. You've got to pick the right people. You've got to develop them in a way that they feel confident having those conversations, because a lot of CS folks, to be honest, don't get any training
Right.
on, relationship building or customer, sit downs, business dinners. They have no idea how to conduct themselves. That's a skill that, like, I think folks should really try and focus on, because it'll help you up your game and set yourself apart from a lot of the folks who just, they don't have access to any of that type of information.
All right. So give us a play by play, literally like, here's the checklist. And assume that I'm not as experienced at doing this as you are, right? So someone who's earlier in their career, they have a lunch meeting with a customer. They have no idea what to do. They have no idea how to approach the whole thing. How do they avoid spending an hour and 15 minutes talking about sports and the weather and Netflix and where they're going on vacation, and actually get something useful out of the meeting?
Yeah, I've got a training that I do internally called, the art of relationship building, that kind of covers it. It's pretty good. One of the things that I recommend is, know what you want to get before you walk into the room. That's called a rich mentality. When the rich walk into a room and sit down and spend their time with someone, there's always something they want to get, whether it's a question or a commitment or something. You've got to know what you want to get before you ever walk in the room. And that takes a little bit of prep. I mean, you got to kind of, like, okay, this guy's the director of engineering, and, we've had a lot of problems with our product. I want to find out, is he a champion? Would he be happy if we got a relationship going with product for him? What's going to get him promoted this year? Or what is his boss really, busting his balls about every week on the one-on-one calls? What do we need to do to take the heat off this guy? I might have 5 questions, core questions, that I really need to get answered and I need to understand before I walk in the room. And then when I get there, that's where you've got to, get some experience doing this, because, the first rule of business dinners is you don't talk business until the entrees hit the table. You get through, if the guy drinks, get a drink in his hand. If he wants an appetizer, get an appetizer, little small talk, weather, sports, whatever at the beginning. But, when that steak hits the table or whatever, that's when the meat of the conversation starts, because at that point you've eased him into it. You've got him relaxed. He's not got up and run out of the restaurant screaming at this point. So he's in, he's in, he's going to sit there and eat the steak. And that's when you can kind of bring the business questions to bear in terms of, hey, tell me about, do you still report to this guy? And you're mapping out the org chart in your mind. And then as you're working through your questions, getting them answered, I want to know, are you happy with our product? What would make you tear us out tomorrow? What would make you tear us out at the end of the year? What's going to lock in the renewal for us? If we get this one deliverable done for you, what would be the most important thing that would make sure you renew at the end of the year? Questions like that, right? And as you kind of get through that, maybe you move to dessert. Dessert is where the closing questions come. Hey, that guy that you talked about earlier, can you introduce me to him? Hey, that professional services engagement that we talked about starting, what do you think about like 4 weeks from now? Would that work for you? I want to come and do a workshop on our product with all your users. What do you think about the end of May? Those are closing questions. Dessert, we lock in those answers. And then when I leave, the most important thing that I coach guys on is, always leave with wanting to get another meeting, right? Is it okay if I check in with you, like this, like maybe once a quarter? Is that all right with you? And he's going to say yes, because you just wined him, you dined him, he's had a steak. It's been reasonably enjoyable. You didn't make it uncomfortable, and so he's going to say yes. And you're going to walk away with a commitment to get another meeting, and you're going to be able to come back. But you came in and you got a ton of value. You didn't waste your time. There's no boondoggle going on there. You have now a firm understanding. And this is how you get to know your accounts, man. Like when I was talking earlier about, you got to know your accounts. You don't get to know your accounts from sitting behind a screen, doing Zoom, emailing people that are never going to read your emails. Like you get to learn about your accounts by sitting in a restaurant, sharing a steak, having a bourbon, whatever it is, and getting to know your customers one-on-one.
Now, we've kind of lost the art of this, especially after the pandemic. would the Zoom as the default, especially by the way, for anyone who has more than 5 accounts, right? The default is Zoom because I can't get through them all, right? I can't go out there and be strategic. But tell us now, like in your relationship building system, how do I, again, assuming I'm earlier in my career, I'm reaching out to someone who's more senior than me, who's older than me, who's more experienced than me. How do I tee up the fact that I want to like come out to wherever they are and have dinner?
Well, I think you're really pitching me some softballs here because it's almost like you've had my class on relationship building.
I have not had your class. I have not seen your class.
It's awesome. So we talk about this in the class where basically, you start setting down breadcrumbs and kind of putting little reminders in your customer's mind from the first moment that you ever meet them, right? When you pick up a new account and you get on calls to get introduced to your customer, you always end them with, hey, I can't wait to see you. You're in Chicago. Next time I'm in Chicago, I'll give you a call. You just start doing this, or if it's over email, hey, I looked you up on LinkedIn. I saw you're in Tampa, Florida. My daughter lives there. I'll see you next time I'm in Tampa. You just start setting this up so that it becomes very easy and very natural in the future at some point. It could be a couple of weeks, could be months, where you come back to this individual after you've been introed and you say, hey, Bob, I'm coming to Chicago next month. I'm speaking at the Customer Success Summit in Chicago next month, actually. And I got a customer up there that I'll call during that time and say, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you mind if I take you to dinner while I'm in town? And, it's a very low stress way to ask because I'm already going to be there. Another way you can do it is I'm coming to see another customer in the area because maybe I got 12 customers across the country and like I got 5 people in Chicago. I know I'm coming to Chicago 2 weeks from now. I'm going to see one of those 5. I don't know which ones yet, but I'm coming. Can I see you while I'm in town? And it makes it very low stress. Customers hate when, or just people, just humans hate when you make things awkward and weird. Like when you're, like, oh, Alex, I'm going to come up to Boulder next week and I'm going to, we're going to go to dinner and I'm just going to sit across the table from you. And it's all about you because I'm just coming to see you, man. Like that would probably make you feel pretty weird.
Yes.
But if I said, hey, Alex, I work, with CU Boulder's AI program, and I'm going to be up for some meetings. Do you mind if I take you out for lunch while I'm in town? That's a lot more natural, right?
Yeah, totally, totally different. I've done that. I've done that one before. I've done that one, as I assume that you have too, like without any other customer in the area. Just been like, hey, I'm going to be in such and such, and I'd love to see you. And then they say yes. It's like, okay, now I'm going to orient my whole trip around just this one person having said yes, which is also okay.
Yeah. Well, and the other great thing about that is like once somebody says yes, you become what's called pre-qualified, right? And so if there's other people at the same company that you want to meet with, suddenly you call like Susie and say, hey, Susie, I'm coming to see Bob in Chicago down the hall from you. Like we're going to lunch. Do you mind, would you like to go to dinner while I'm in town? I mean, and Susie just instinctively says, oh my God, if Bob thinks Carl's okay to meet with, then he's probably okay. So yeah, nice. Sounds good. I'll meet with Carl,
and look, this is a lost art, and I just want to share for anyone who's listening. Like, I'm not serving Carl up these softballs so that we can just jawbone over this stuff. This is an important art, and when you're looking at managing the ultra accounts that Carl's got, you've got to do a lot more FaceTime. You've got to do a lot more work on the personal stuff, on the actual relationships with these customers, and even by the way, if you have a bigger portfolio, these are still skills that are going to apply because you're going to have segmentation within your accounts. You're going to have big ones, small ones. You want to know how to behave with these. And so that's why I'm leading Carl through these questions, is so that we all understand how this can apply in our portfolio today. Carl, let me just wrap up here. I got a question for you. We're coming up on the end of the year, and this is QBR time. It's renewals time. There's always a ton of activity in Q4. How do you suggest that people orient their time in Q4 to get out there and not only close the year out as strong as possible, but also to set themselves up for 2026 success in the best way possible?
No, I like it. You're getting proactive at the end of the year to help get ready for 2026 already. I'm already thinking about this because I just got some new customers. I haven't met with them yet. I'm just getting to kind of know them and figure out where they're at. But you've only got, a few weeks really when you think about it between now and the end of the year, because we're going to take off, the week of Christmas. We got the week after Christmas that we're going to take off, Thanksgiving. Maybe some people are going to do something for Halloween or whatever. So, I mean, you're very limited in what you got left between now and the end of the year. It's time to, start kind of beating the streets and seeing who you can see, as much as possible leading up until the end of the year, so that you maximize the time that's available on the calendar. And I mean, I'll say too, it's also really important to block off those holiday weeks and, spend some downtime with your family and friends, because there is a heavy cost to winning in this business, right? I mean, those of us who've been doing it for a long time, the road takes its toll on our bodies. It beats us up, the sleepless nights, the late nights at steakhouses that, tax our livers, and maybe we miss the gym, miss our wives and our kids and things like that. It's an important time of year, I think, to also put the focus back inward in terms of, there's only so much you can do for your customers. You've got a certain number of days. But a great time of year to kind of renew your focus on your own well-being and the well-being of your family and the relationships within. I always tell my wife she's my number one top customer and best sale I ever made, and it's important that we remind ourselves of that from time to time, and that we think about work is great, and being the best at what you do is amazing, but it's nothing if you at the end of the day have nothing to come home to. And you don't have those home fires burning. So,
hey, I appreciate that. Well, Carl Lenocker, thanks for joining us here on Account Management Secrets. Thanks for sharing about your philosophy on QBRs and what it means to really manage an ultra account. Really appreciate having you.
Thanks, Alex. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds great.